All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg, and it is Monday, and I'm still kind of sick a little bit, coughing and stuff. Hopefully we won't have the Jags we had Friday, and I was pleased to see the Friday video performing pretty well for me, but we want to get more and more viewers, obviously. Well, I do. Maybe nobody else does, but I want more, so please do click like. Please click subscribe. Interact in any way you possibly can with our videos, commenting, sending me a text during the program through the chat line, anything that works for you. We really, really appreciate here, obviously, at Halitics. No left-handed leftist today. I was hoping to have Carlos on. Carlos is our regular co-host, I want to say our Halitics regular co-host Mondays. And we're going to talk a little bit about Graham Platner and some of his commentary. Got some critique of it by an African-American black columnist at the New York Times, Tracy McMillan Cottom. And I wanted Carlos's feedback on that, as well as a Reddit post, I guess, a question Platner asked about tipping by black customers. And I really wanted Carlos to be part of that conversation, but which actually I didn't even realize there was a questionable Reddit post to that effect by Platner, but Carlos not able to make it. Maybe if he's watching, he'll call in 240-242-5646. You may hear also Dolly in the background, who's kind of fussling around back behind me. I didn't want to have her in the show, in the room with me, but she insisted. So here she is, and we may hear her howl a little bit. My old dog, Ginger, was quieter. Well, she never was in the room with me, so who knows? The situation, well, we'll get to Platner. We've got some other stories to get to. Unfortunately, tragically, we're still centering Gaza right here on Halitics. The situation there, I guess, maybe it's not quite as horrific in terms of the every day seeing dozens, if not hundreds, killed, though Israel did have 104 104 killings one day last week. So you see Israel has absolutely not abandoned its idea of eradicating the people of Gaza off the face of the planet. And really, I should say the Palestinian, because Israel's also committing murder in the West Bank. But it's especially bad. It's especially horrific for Gaza. We know also Sudan, I don't want to leave that out of the mix. Sudan is also experiencing terrible, terrible genocidal, if not actual genocide at this moment for many of its folks there. So it's a terrible, terrible situation in the Middle East and in Africa as well. Live from Israel, this is Al Jazeera earlier today. You can see the dateline there, November 3rd. Israel kills 3 in Gaza, and Palestinians say food scarce amid ceasefire. So Israel continues to prevent food from reaching its victims. The people it's keeping continues to imprison in its open-air concentration camp. I'll never forget I got into this argument 7 years ago with a friend, I guess, and I described Gaza as an open-air concentration camp. And this friend said to me, "Oh, no, that's horrible. You're using Nazi-like imagery to describe what Israel's doing. And yes, I don't like what Israel's doing, and there are problems there." This was a Jewish friend. I don't like it. I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying it's okay what Israel, but they're not Nazis. They're not that bad. And I said, well, it is a concentration camp. They're keeping them in prison. They're behind barbed wire. There's army all around it. "Oh, no, this isn't Auschwitz. This isn't." And I said, well, Auschwitz was a death camp. There's a difference between a death camp and a concentration camp. "Oh, no, those are arbitrary distinctions. There's no difference." I said, that is false. If you weren't sent to a death camp, you almost certainly were murdered. But many of the people at the concentration camps were not necessarily Jewish. They were not necessarily undesirables, such as gypsies, gays, and the like. You also had political prisoners in concentration camps, and you also, you had various people put in those concentration camps who weren't necessarily slated to be murdered. It's this one led to the other. There's no distinction. Okay. And plus, even if you can sort of make a distinction, you're still using Nazi imagery, and that's wrong, and you shouldn't do it. So this is what you have to deal with these people who are just absolutely bound and determined because of their identity to refuse, to reject the notion that Israel could be just that evil. And I see my dog, sorry to have to bend down, but I was trying to figure out what the heck she was doing. She was actually poking holes in my throat lozenges. The situation, Israel just, I don't know how else to compare Israel except to some sort of horrific totalitarian state. Now, I understand they do have elections there, but that makes it worse that the military has such control over the government and over the people and over the media. So the fact that a majority ultimately is comfortable with Netanyahu being prime minister, to me, is a greater indictment of Israel than if he had simply, seized power in a coup, in an anti-democratic coup, the way Hitler did. And I understand Hitler was nominated, he was appointed to be chancellor by the President Hindenburg, but that was because he was able to muster enough support in one moment, despite only getting 33% of the vote. And even then, it wasn't clear that the German Bundestag had rallied behind him. In Israel now, arrests for a leaked video showing Palestinian abuse of Palestinians, not the abuser, not the torturer, not the Israeli soldiers who were guilty. No, they're not facing the punishment. It's the person who actually told you, who let you know that this is what Israel is. This is a state that tortures. This is a state that kills. This is a state that targets children, that tortures children. That is what Israel is, and we must break with Israel. Now, you hate Trump? You're one of those people who hates Trump? I don't like Trump. I think Trump is terrible. I think Trump is taking away what freedoms we still have. I don't believe that there's any democratic small d impulses in Trump. If you hate Trump, then you know what you need to do? You need to unite forces with the right students, the right youth, the right leadership, the people like Marjorie Taylor Greene who are saying, we can't support Israel. The people like Candace Owens who are saying, we can't support Israel. We must break with Israel. I'm not saying you embrace their pro-billionaire policies, their libertarianism. I'm not saying that. Say, hey, let's work together to stop this. Let's support only Democratic and progressive candidates who are outspoken in their disdain, their anger at Israel, their rejection of Israel and all its works. That's the way we can make change. That's the only way. We can build a coalition, a pro-peace, anti-genocide, anti-Israel coalition. That's possible. Pro-Palestine coalition. That can be done. And when that is done, if that is done, we can certainly use that coalition. Now, it will morph. It will change. It won't be the same. But that coalition can morph into one that is also pro-Medicare for all, pro-sane trade policies that build good jobs for American, pro-environment. We can do all of it. Now, is Candace Owens or Tucker Carlson, are they pro-environment? Dave Smith? I don't think so. I've never seen that. I've never detected. They may not come around, but there are lots of progressives who are. And together we can build that movement if we fight for true justice. That's not what the Democratic Party is. They're not doing that. Is Zoran Mamdani that person? One of them. Maybe Graham Platner. Is he that person? Maybe. Do we need to look to the Green Party? Absolutely. Or we will get nowhere. Now, I am somebody who, more than many hosts on YouTube and elsewhere, I don't know who else really embraces the view I do, that ultimately the only real change we can make is through our political processes. I know there are people who say, let's get in the streets, and yes, free speech and protesting your government and exposing the evils that it does are really important, that our leaders do, is really, really important. But if we want, but we all know, Brianna Joy Gray made this point. We all know how bad it is. We've already won the argument. We've won the argument. Israel's evil. And yet we keep supporting Israel. How can we unite together to unite against these genocidal candidates? That's the only thing, pro-genocide candidates. That's the only solution I have. You have a different solution, I really want to hear it. 240-242-5646. I know, general strike. That's great. Good luck with that. We have like 4% union density in this country. Good luck getting a general strike together. I'm not saying it's not something that could happen, but isn't it a lot easier to just elect good people? Is that so difficult? Why is it so difficult? Well, here, this got me nervous. Okay, so I'm all in for Mamdani, and I've been talking him up, and I am all in for him. I don't think he's necessarily going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. I have concerns, real concerns. He could well, and I had the video where Cenk asks Graham Platner, how do we know you're not going to be another Fetterman? Which is a great question. How do we know Zoran won't be another Fetterman? We don't. And maybe a better comp for him would be AOC. We don't know that he won't be another AOC. We can only hope. We can only hold his feet to the fire. But at least he's talked better, much better rhetoric than other politicians of recent vintage. Now here, this poll came out Friday. I think it was Friday, maybe it was Saturday morning. Saturday morning, I saw it. Maybe it came out Friday night. I was super nervous when I saw this. Look at this Atlas Intel. According to this poll, Mamdani with a 6.6 lead. He could easily lose. This terrified me. Look at the source, Atlas Intel. Atlas Intel got it, the 24 presidential election right more than anybody else. They're, according to Nate Silver, the most accurate pollster out there. That's the numbers they published. I was terrified. Most popular, I'm not going to show you, we don't need to do the video, but most popular pollster, or not most popular, I don't know, popular pollster, most accurate pollster, the one who got it right more than anybody else in the 24, closest into most states. And I remember them coming out and saying that Kamala was losing Michigan, losing Wisconsin, losing PA. And those were states that in other polls, she had been winning. Excuse me for the cough there. So you can see here, Nate Silver has Atlas Intel more correct calls than any other. Well, not more than research and polling, but the most accurate, number one. So that's pretty impressive for Atlas. And it made me very, very nervous when I saw that. I'll tell you, let's go to that video after all. We're just going to show it real quick here. Here's CBS News with reporting rather gleefully that Zoran might go down to defeat.
Mamdani's lead could be narrowing. A new Atlas poll, which surveyed over 1,500 people through October 30th, shows Mamdani at 40, former Governor Andrew Cuomo at 34, and Republican candidate Curtis Sliwa at 24. Cuomo, who's running as an independent.
All right, so sorry about the cough there, folks. I thought I had myself muted, but the issue there, they said 40%. Actually, it is, if you're going to round, you round up from 40.6 to 41. It's closer to 41 than 40. But yeah, 6.5 points. Very, very nerve-wracking. Very scary to see that. And again, this is the number one rated pollster according to Nate Silver. But I was really amazed when I saw that poll. And I'll tell you why I was amazed. Because before I looked at that poll, this is what I do. By the way, this is my life. I wake up, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 5 a.m., I look at polls. This was probably around 7 a.m., I think, because earlier it wasn't in the New York Times. This is where they were all in the New York Times. Or so. But what really surprised me was I've been tracking the election and the odds of who's going to win most closely in Polymarket. That's the gambling, right, where you can bet on these elections. And I'm going to show you, this is the past week on Polymarket. That poll came out on October 31st. So you can look at the bottom, you see the date. There's no change. It's a flat line, right? It's the whole time Mamdani's been well over 80, close now to 100. He's at 95%, 95.1%, something like that. So what happened on October 31st? That poll, I would have thought, if the most accurate pollster in America, Atlas Intel, according to the Oracle Nate Silver, says it's only a 6.5 point race. And it's narrowing, right? I mean, it had been up at like, according to some pollsters, 16. One had 20. Emerson, I think 25%. Mamdani leads. So how could he only be up by 6.5 and you don't see any shift? Well, first of all, it seemed pretty implausible. But I don't know, there's been so much negative attention to Mamdani, and who knows what he might have said that rubbed people the wrong way. I don't know. But the only shift you really see, the only noticeable shift over this week is at the beginning of the week, Mamdani's odds did narrow from over 90 to the mid 80s, actually, to the mid 80s. And that was because a couple of polls did come out that showed him only 10 points up, not 6 as the Atlas. So his odds were reduced. And then they bounced back up because some other good pollsters, Quinnipiac, I believe, and Emerson for sure, maybe not Quinnipiac, but Emerson and some others said, no, it's more like 16, 20%. And also, on top of those polls, were reports that the younger folks were indeed voting, right? That the early vote count was including many younger voters. Now, we don't know what that early vote count is, but we do know that the demographics match as thought they would what the pollsters who predict a landslide victory for Mamdani. So for all those reasons, Mamdani's edge widened over Cuomo. So, but nothing happened on October 31st. There was no change, no blip down, maybe a tiny 1% blip down for Mamdani and up for Cuomo after that Atlas poll. So that really surprised me. Like, what the hell's going on with that Atlas poll? Atlas poll is the most, again, according to the Oracle, Nate Silver, the most accurate pollster in recent years. It used to be Ann Selzer in Iowa, but then she totally blew it with this poll that came out a week before, or over the weekend before the general election in 24, where she found that, in fact, Kamala was winning Iowa. She was going to win, according to Selzer. And, I saw that poll and I thought, I didn't really, honestly, this is going to be heresy for some listeners, I suppose, but I was so disillusioned by Kamala Harris. I didn't care. I honestly didn't. I mean, her utter refusal, despite every opportunity to champion some type of pro-Palestine or anti-Israel policy to keep Israel somewhat accountable. Her campaign about nothing. I was so disillusioned, I didn't care. But I saw that Selzer poll and I thought, well, I guess Kamala's going to win, which I had predicted. I got that completely wrong. So I'm the worst person to look to for prediction. When Atlas poll says, hey, it's only 6.5 points, they got predictions right. I'm pretty sure I'm wrong. If I think, Mamdani's going to win by a landslide. But again, the gambling markets showed no changes. The Atlas poll went off the gamblers like water off a duck's back. So why? And I got the answer in a Twitter and an X post, which I don't have here, but here's why. This is the methodology. So according to, and as soon as the gamblers saw this, and as soon as this got reported, I think people just rejected that Atlas poll completely. So the breakdown of those polled is actually far closer to the breakdown by party in the state of New York, not the city of New York. So according, So the people who were polled were 21% Republican, 23% Independent, and 55.6% Democrat, which looks like a pretty strong lean towards Democrats, right? You say, well, New York City's a Democratic city, and they got 2.5 times as many Democrats as Republicans being polled. That makes sense. So, yeah, I guess it makes sense that, if this poll says that they're asking the right people, 2.5 times as many Democrats as Republicans, so probably maybe Cuomo really is close the gap. Maybe Cuomo really does have a shot. The problem is, in New York City, you don't have 2.5 times as many Democrats as Republicans. You have 6 times as many Democrats as Republicans. So if you vastly oversample Republicans versus Democrats, then you see a closer race. But here's the actual enrollment. And what's also interesting is people might say, well, fewer Democrats are less enthusiastic, this and that, which may have been true in 24, but it's not true now. Democrats, especially to the left ones, the ones who are going to vote for Mamdani, are the ones who are most excited. So if you're going to go a 2.5 to 1 Dem to Republican, you're going to vastly underrate the likelihood that the Democrat will win. And Mamdani's a Democrat. One was an independent, or whatever he is, Women's Party, whatever he calls himself, and then Slee was a Republican. So there you see it. 3.5 million Democratic registered voters in New York City. You see within New York City total, 570,000 Republicans, 6 times as many Dems, more than 6 times as many Dems. So given that fact, and then if you just go by active, let's forget about leave the active, there's even more so. It's more than 6 times. It's over 6 times as many Democrats. So think about that. In a poll by a reputable pollster, 2.5 times as many Democrats as Republicans, vastly undersampling Democrats. Mamdani is a huge lead. Huge lead. Now, if you shift it so that you have almost, you weight it fairly, you got to figure Mamdani's lead is 2 or 3 times bigger. Because rather than 2.5 times as many Democrats, there should be 5, 6, 7 times as many. So let's just say it's twice as big. So suddenly instead of 6.5, now it's 13. That sounds about right. Not saying Mamdani's going to win. I don't bet on these things. I would never do that. But fact of the matter is, there's no reasonable basis to conclude he won't win. And if he doesn't win, I was telling my son about this, he is convinced that it would have to be rigged. That would have to be something where Cuomo, Trump, what have you, together, which wouldn't shock anybody, I don't think. Would it? I mean, it wouldn't shock anyone to think they would try to do that. Not saying they could do it, but if they could, they would. Here's the voter breakdown by New York state as opposed to New York City. So remember I said that they're using 2.5 times as many Dems as Republicans in the poll of New York City. That Atlas sampled 2.5 times as many rather than 6 times as many, which is what they should have. But they used the right breakdown. If you look at the state, or close, you have over twice as many Democrats as Republicans. So that's maybe where they got that breakdown. That's the best I can come up with. Is somehow Atlas used the state registration breakdown to project how many voters it should interview and from which parties. That's the only thing I can come up with. They could get it so wrong. Now, they are a Republican-leaning firm, so that could be part of it. Who knows? 240-242-5646. Now, my dog is making some more noise. I don't know what she's doing back there, but this is what you get. This is like homegrown podcasting. This isn't your, super flashy, smooth running, easy listening podcast. This is rough around the edges, Halitics, where you get the dog in the background making noises. All right. This is from Tressie. I hope I got her name right. Did I call her Teresa? I don't think so. I think I said Tressie. That's her name. Tressie McMillan Cottom. And I have to tell you, one of my frustrations, New York Times has a number of black commentators, black columnists, including Tressie McMillan Cottom. They have Charles Blow. They have, I forgot the guy's name now. He used to write, I think, for the New Republic. But they're all, I want to say centrist. They're all loyalist Democrats. They may criticize the Democrat Party for being insufficiently woke, for being insufficiently identity focused on black concerns, but they're not pro-working class. They're not pro poor necessarily, except they break the populace down. They do the slice and dice, which really troubles me, where you focus on identity, innate identity, gender, race, ethnicity, as opposed to class. They're not class warriors, and that for me is a problem. I want class warriors. Bob Herbert used to be pretty close to that. He was their strongest class warrior. He doesn't write for that. He was black. He is black, but he no longer writes for them. So here, Tressie McMillan Cottom goes after Graham Platner for his Nazi tattoo. And first of all, is it a Nazi tattoo? Well, we'll talk a little bit about that. I think it's fair to say it is, although I don't know that he knew it was. Let's play this clip here. This is from Pod Save America. So just a sec as he comes up.
The research world gets pretty fucking disgusting.
All right, so he uses the curse. He's kind of like those, the Kyle Kulinski style, which is where we curse, right? It's hey, let's be authentic. Let's use the big F word and stuff. And no, I don't like that. To me, that's useless. That doesn't help. But okay, he does it. Let's play the clip a little bit more.
I think you're kind of hinting at that. Speaking of which, in kind of a non-traditional campaign move, your team actually shared some opposition research on you with me. It's a video from, I believe, a decade ago. Let's just watch an excerpt and then we should talk about it.
All right, so I'm going to just stop it there. Actually, I meant to stop the video so you could see it, but I'll show it now because I got it right on screen. This is the source. As far as we know, right there, you can see that tattoo there, and he's drunk. He's out with my dad. Why shouldn't he enjoy yourself, right? And there's that tattoo. So that's a death's head. Apparently, it's a death's head tattoo. And I did a little research. So people say it's a Nazi tattoo. I'm like, well, was he a swastika? Right? I mean, that's the first thing you think of, a swastika. That would be problematic in my view. Although, honestly, I'd vote for him. If I was in Maine, he had a swastika, wouldn't stop me from voting for him. I mean, and I'm not saying that's not really an ugly symbol. Of course it is. It's horrible. But what are the problems we face right now? We don't face a rise of Nazism that from the left, which he is. I mean, the issues we face right now. And I'm not, if he was an overt Nazi, of course I wouldn't vote for him. But let's say that when he was like 15 or 16 years old, or I guess he was a Marine or something, he was in the Army, whatever. He was on, or was it like Blackwater he worked for? I don't know. He's out with his buddies. He's still a teen. He's drunk out of his ass. So he gets a tattoo and he gets a Nazi tattoo. Now you should get rid of it, right? I mean, I'll be honest, I would have problems with that. I mean, I said I would still vote for him. I probably still would because I'm so disgusted with neoliberalism and neoconservatism and our, expansion of our empire. I'm so upset by all of that yeah, I don't know what I would do in this case. If you had a true progressive populist who was championing Medicare for all, which, by the way, I'm not sure he does. But if you had a true class warrior who didn't espouse anything anti-Semitic or racist. Because one of the points that Carlos made was that, hey, being when we talked about the program, being a neo-Nazi doesn't just mean anti-Semitic, it also includes being anti-Black. And I agree with that. Of course. I've always associated Nazism first and foremost with anti-Semitism, Jew hatred. I don't sense he hates Jews. I don't get that. I don't get that vibe. That's not how he campaigns. I got other things to worry about. I got people who are actually being right now eradicated from the planet that I'm worried about. I've got poverty. I've got people who are going bankrupt because of healthcare absence. They don't have healthcare. So, yes. So, yes, you should feed Dolly. My wife is asking me if she should feed the dog lunch. I'm saying, yes, you should. So those are the things that I'm worried about. I'm not worried about some Totenkopf tattoo, which Platner apparently claims, at least at the time he didn't know it was a Totenkopf, although now he does. Now, let me just see. Yeah, we saw that. But now I look at this, and I got to say, I think it probably is, right? So the image on the right as you're looking at your screen, that is an actual, I guess, SS death's head. And the best we can come up with, it looks pretty much like what, I guess, although, it's just the shade and the shadow and all that. But that doesn't mean he knew at the time when he got it. Apparently, he finally figured out he's going to get it covered up. I just can't lose my sleep over this, man. I mean, look, this is like a Halloween where people will get Halloween skeletons and the like. I just isn't a big deal to me. I care about policy. That's the only thing I care about, or 99% of it. That's what I care about. What are you going to do? How are you going to fight for poor, struggling, working people? What do you believe are the solutions to the terrible problems we face as a nation? He says he doesn't want to give money to Israel. I'm down with that. He doesn't want to give money to fight, in Ukraine. I'm down with that. I believe he does. He supports universal health care in some fashion. He said he would support the Bernie Sanders bill. He will not vote for Chuck Schumer. That's what matters to me. Now, I'll show you something that I find a huge turnoff. And yet, at the same time, I can't fault him for this. So here he is at this town hall. And, you have to do your apology tour because you got your death's head tat or whatever. So here he's on this apology tour. And I don't love this, but I guess I can't fault him for it either.
I'd love to be out protesting. I would love to be out knocking on doors.
So there's a trans activist who's, I guess, upset, and they're calling on Platner to support their agenda.
Like me could get killed right now in this country.
I'm going to say she because she appears to be a woman, and I'm assuming that they are a trans woman. Says that she could be killed, and I don't know what the numbers are. Sounds to me a little bit hyperbolic. I'm not aware. I know there was a trans college student from Middlebury who was found dead on campus, trans woman, but she took her own life. She wasn't murdered. So I don't know. Sounds a little much to me. I don't know what the statistics are. Maybe that's fair. Maybe I'm being unfair to say that. But okay. This woman is obviously very concerned about her own safety.
Better man than you once were in the past, because I'm a better person than I was in the past. If I stand with you, will you fight? I'd love to be out protesting. I would love to be out knocking on doors. But I'll be honest, a person like me could get killed right now in this country. I believe in you, and I believe that you are a better man than you once were in the past, because I'm a better person than I was in the past. If I stand with you, will you fight with me? Will you stand up for me? So she says, hey, if I stand with you, if I support you, and I think you're a better person than you were when you got that tattoo, I don't know. Was he such a bad person when he had the tattoo? He didn't know what it was. He wanted something that was scary looking. When you're drunk and you're a teenager, you do stupid things. I don't want to be judged on what I did. I judge myself
by what I did as a teenager, and I judge myself very harshly because I did some really bad things. And I'm really sorry I did them, and I wish I hadn't, but I did. I'm not going to judge Platner and say, oh, you're such a better. I mean, look, we all do our good and bad and the whole 9 yards. What do you stand for? Now, so this woman is saying, will you stand with me if I stand with you? And I'm like, what does that mean? I know what it means when you say I'm going to stand with you, Platner. It means you're going to vote for me. It means you're going to knock on doors for me. You're going to try to get me elected to be the senator from Maine, the U.S. senator from Maine. I get what that means. But what does it mean for a trans person who says, are you going to stand with me? I honestly, I'm not clear. And I wish that had been made clear. Because if I'm Platner, I would want to know what I'm being asked to stand with. So that's my question. By the way, if you hear me typing a little bit, I'm just trying to find out what the percentage is. It says here, transgender people are more, murder of trans people nearly doubled over past 4 years. So apparently that was between 2017 and 21 when Trump was president. And I'm not clear, but nearly 3/4 of the victims are Black trans women. So that there's a lot of violence, I guess, against. And I think what happens there, I'm not sure. This is just a guess. That's what that article just said, is that nearly 3/4 of the victims of violence against or murders against trans women or against trans people, 3/4 of the murder of the trans murder victims. 3/4 of the trans murder victims are Black women or Black trans women. That is what that is saying. And I think, and I could be totally wrong there, but I think what that is about maybe prostitutes whose John discovers that during the act that they're with a biological male. I think that is what may trigger some of that violence, but I really don't know. But it's not just, so that's really something to bear in mind. But this woman does not seem to fit that profile of somebody who's more likely to be a murder victim. I'm not saying she's not afraid, but I always get a little bit leery of people who claim to be likely to be victims, like Jews who are always saying, oh, there's so much anti-Semitism, I could get killed, I can't walk around my campus, which is a load of crap. So I'm somewhat skeptical. That said, obviously there's much more. Transphobia is a real thing. Anti-Semitism in America is a load of crap. So there is a difference there. I accept that. But still, when I'm being asked as a candidate, will you stand up for me? I'd like to know just what that means. Does that mean, will I support the right of trans adults to get gender affirming care? Absolutely. Does that mean I will support the right of trans children to get gender affirming care? Well, I will certainly support their right to get support psychological help, support therapy, and affirming that says, yes, it's okay to be trans. If you're trans, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You're perfectly normal. It's just that, your feeling of yourself as in terms of your gender doesn't necessarily match your physiology, and that is fine. I mean, in a way, it does match it because some people with penises feel like they're women. That's true. Some people with vaginas feel like they're men. That's fine. Doesn't mean anything. It's just that's who you are. But it's hard. Obviously, it's hard. So yes, do I support that? Do I support hormone therapy for for minors, I don't know. I'm not sure I would stand with you on that. I'm not saying I wouldn't, but I'm not sure I would. I'm not sure I would stand with you on surgeries for trans people. I'm not sure I would stand with you when it comes to having trans girls and women competing against biological girls and women in sports. I don't know. So I would like to know what that means. But if you're Graham Platner, so that's where I am. But if you're Graham Platner and you're running for senator, you're not going to start asking those kind of questions. You're like, hey, I'm a little bit on thin ice. I got this Nazi tattoo, supposedly. I guess it is. I mean, it looks like it probably was, and I didn't know it, and I got it wrong. I tweeted stuff when I was younger that, certainly is provocative at best. So I'm not going to start asking questions. Somebody says they're going to stand with me or stand for me. I'll say, oh, sure, I'll stand for you. It doesn't even mean anything at this point. So I find this stuff the empty politics. I find this stuff is exactly what we're all against, really, in the end. What we want, I think most of us want, this is why Kamala Harris lost. We want specifics. We want the details filled in when it comes to the policies and politics that you're going to promote. So everyone loves that.
I firmly believe that every single American has the right to live the life they want to live in their own body as they see fit.
Isn't that incredibly platitudinous? I heard someone say Graham platitude. And I hate to say it. That sounds awfully platitudinous. I firmly believe every American has the right to live the life they want to live in their body. Okay. But that doesn't really tell us anything, does it?
I also fully recognize that as a cis white male,
he says cis. I think it's cis, but okay.
Combat record, that I get to put myself out there in ways that other people don't.
So I wonder about that. Is that really true? That's one of the things you hear is like, well, you get to talk because you're white and you're a man and I don't get to talk. And I'm like, is that really? I mean, it's true in Israel. If you're Palestinian, you try to talk, you get killed. But the fact is, if you're a Jew and you speak out against the genocide of the Palestinian people, you get killed too. So or tortured or disappeared, right? I mean, they don't make distinctions. If you criticize their policy, they're going to take you on. So is it really fair to say that it's because you're a cis white male or cis white male that you have these? What are those privileges? I'm curious. Tell me about that, Graham. But I don't think he's going to say that.
I just want to tell you, this is why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because I know that I can say things. I know that I can have conversations. I know that I can knock on doors in places that a lot of other people can't have access to, that a lot of other people won't feel safe in.
I mean, I just don't understand that. Because look, Barack Obama got more votes than anybody running for president. I don't think he got the most votes because we have population grown, but in terms of when he ran, when he got the most votes, he could go anywhere. I'm not saying, of course, there's gross inequalities in our society, and some identifiable groups have it worse than other identifiable. If you're a member of one particular group, you're much more likely to be poor than if you're a member. If you're Jewish, you're less likely to be poor than if you're black or you're Native American. And that's true. I don't deny that. But that doesn't mean because I'm Jewish, I can knock on doors that other people can't. It means because I'm relatively rich that I can knock on doors. And that's got nothing to do with being Jewish. I mean, just a disproportionate. So I don't quite get his point. I really don't. But then, look, he wants to win. So he's going to say what he thinks his audience wants to hear.
That is a responsibility that I feel, and it is why I am doing this. And I just want to say thank you, because I know how hard this is.
So, yeah, again,
I would love to be out knocking on doors.
So let me just jump ahead there.
This is a guy that some people.
So
that is a responsibility that I feel, and it is why I am doing this. And I just want to say thank you, because I know how hard this is. Yeah, I just want to say that, yes, I will absolutely stand next to you. And if we ever have to go knock doors together, I'm happy to stand by your side.
So to me, that's no promise at all. That's nothing. That's meaningless. He's not actually speaking of any particular policy or change that will benefit the woman that asked him the question. Now, I think it's hard because what he said got a lot of applause. It was, and he didn't commit himself to anything. But in the end, I think people would watch that and they would think, yeah, it's nothing. Nothing. What would have been, I think, perhaps a better answer is, if it was me, what I probably would have said is, hey, thank you so much for the support. I believe that every single American should have health care from cradle to grave. I would be fighting tooth and nail to make sure that if you need treatment, you have some sort of health emergency, that you would get it. That's my promise to you. Is there something else that you want to hear from me? Is there some other policy program that you want me to support that you're concerned I won't support? That's what I would ask. That's how I would have responded. Now, I saw this and I was like, I would love to talk to Carlos about this. I really would. This is like one of those issues that come up that make everyone uncomfortable. And I would like to discuss it. So he apparently 14 years ago asked why black people don't tip and reference rape in old Reddit posts. I was talking to my son about this. I said, yeah, he said some black bartenders actually said, yeah, it's probably it's not unfair for him to say that. It's not what you want to say. You don't want to make invidious comparisons. It's not, it doesn't, it divides us, that kind of a commentary. It's divisive. It's problematic. Would it stop me from voting for Graham Platner? No. I understand. Look, I get it. I do. I know that there was a guy in D.C., this guy who's a progressive restaurant owner. I forgot his name. Andy Shalal, very well known. He owns the Poets, Busboys and Poets chain. It's a chain. It's done super well. And there was an article about him and his training of servers. And they talk about this very issue that you have to treat every customer the same, even if you're concerned they won't give as big a tip. And in fact, the received wisdom that black customers tip less than white ones was addressed, where Shalal said, well, it may be true. He didn't deny it. He said there may be times when you find that our African-American patrons are less generous with gratuities. You can't discriminate against them in any way because of that. You can't presume it, assume it, or act accordingly, regardless of that possibility. So I read that article, it was in the Washington Post, and I wrote a response. And my response was, well, why the hell don't you just support tips, an end to tips, where the tips are the restaurateur's responsibility, where you have to pay a guaranteed minimum wage, where not just a guaranteed, your wages have to be where the compensation for the waiters goes to, the servers goes to, not through tips. You don't assume the tip, because you're going to have invidious comparisons this way if you don't guarantee the servers a living wage and include them in the minimum wage laws. So to me, that's the right answer. And I would, like it if Graham Platner would say that too. 240-242-5646 if you want to join me. That said, yeah, I'm not thrilled that he put that in a Reddit post. But again, it was a long time, it was 11, 12, 13 years ago, and it wouldn't prevent me from voting for him. Now I'm white. I'd like to know what Carlos has to say about that. as a black man, maybe he would have a different view. To me, policy is what matters. If his policies are going to lead to better outcomes for poor, struggling, and working people, period, then that's all I really care about. Now, I thought Tressie McMillan Cottom, in her New York Times piece, just totally elided what to me is most important. What's most important is, will the policies make life better for poor, struggling, and working people? That's all, that's like 100% of it for me. That's why, that's why the Nazi tattoo, not even the skull and the cross, the death's head, that's less important to me, because how does that go to the working people? I want to make sure if I'm concerned as a Jew that I could be targeted, the best way I know to address that is to reduce wealth and income inequality and poverty. People are far less likely to hate Jews if they feel like they're getting a fair deal, that everyone has enough and no one has enough, too much. When 25%, 30%, I don't know what percentage, it's a very high percentage of Americans who are billionaires are Jewish, and there's so many people in poverty, so 40% or some number like that are on SNAP. Well, that's going to, like, what did I say? People make invidious comparisons, right? They're being served by, they're getting tips, they're servers at a restaurant. They, for whatever, anecdotally, or even maybe they keep track, what have you, they observe, they seem to observe, they get the sense that they're getting less tips from black customers. They're going to remember that. They're going to be annoyed by it. It's going to be in their minds. They're going to post about it on Reddit. Well, if you're barely getting by and you see Jewish billionaires like Bill Ackman demanding, insisting that we send billions and billions of dollars to Israel to kill people, you're going to remember that. You're not going to like it. You'll probably start blaming Jews in general for that. Especially when the money's not just going to Israel, it's going to the Jewish state. So I'm about making things fair. I think that makes my life better too, even though I'm fine. I don't need that kind of, there's other things I care about. I don't need more money for myself. I don't need more buying power. The things I care about, healthcare for all. And I could even say that personally for me, because heck, like I said, I have enough. But cancer, maybe I wouldn't have enough. I don't know. So right now, I prioritize economic justice and, of course, the environment, because we're burning our planet up more than anything else. I think Platner's the right candidate to address those issues. I support him. Now, it's odd because Tressie Cottom even acknowledges. She says what may or may not have been a symbol of the SS. I think it probably was. Now he's going to cover it up. Why is she just so fixated on this? Why is this so important to her? And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. Because she writes for the New York Times. And the New York Times doesn't give a crap about economic justice. I'll tell you why. Because she's an academic. And she made her name focusing on identity, on how being a black woman makes your life harder. Not on how being poor ruins your life, means that you have so much less, means that you go to bed hungry sometimes, or you're terrified your kids will be homeless. That's not what her focus was. If that had been her focus, she wouldn't have become a professor, probably. She wouldn't have gotten tenure, because we don't care about the poor people. We don't care about the poor in this country. People who fund universities, who give $1 million grants, don't fund research into poverty and how to address it. They fund efforts to divide us by race, by religion, by ethnicity, by nation of origin. That's what's funded, because that benefits the elites. And it's benefited Tressie McMillan Cottom. And she writes for the New York Times. And the New York Times doesn't support economic justice. It doesn't support democratic socialism. It supports Andrew Cuomo. So you look back at Cottom's record, and what does she talk about when she talked about how great Kamala Harris is back in August of 24, and how Kamala needed to be president, and this would be the best thing for this country, is if Kamala Harris was president. Does she talk about Kamala Harris's policies? Does she say this is what Kamala will do that will make life? I get you care about your identity. I understand that. We all do. I don't. See, this is hard for me because I don't particularly put Jews above any other group. I don't say, oh, I'm Jewish, so I care about Jews. I don't do that. But, I get that lots of people do. I see, gays. I care about gays. I'm trans. I care about trans. I don't see it that way, but that's just. But if you are focused on identity politics, then it would seem to me that you would want to support candidates whose policies will make life better for the identity group that you care about. And there's not one word in this encomium to Kamala Harris by Tressie McMillan Cottom. There's not one word that discusses how she would be good for black people. Now, I understand that's McMillan Cottom's overall priority is African Americans. But she doesn't tell you why Kamala Harris would be better for black people. She tells you how great she is. She's a different candidate. She lands her applause lines. Oh, well, that's a great reason to vote for her. She sounds authentic. Not she is authentic. She sounds authentic. I guess her most consistent message is that Trump wants to send America back to the dark ages. But she doesn't say what she wants to do. At least Cottom doesn't. She walks an impossible tightrope for a black female candidate. But how does that relate to what she's going to do? Is she going to address healthcare disparities in America? Is she going to address the terribly high poverty rate among black families? She's going to talk about incarceration of black men. I don't know. And I don't know if Tressie McMillan Cottom knows. If she does, she doesn't tell you. She doesn't give you one, and again, those are really important issues. But she doesn't talk about them. So I don't know why she supports. Honestly, I read this. I have no idea why she likes Kamala Harris at all. Or why, even if I can sort of guess she likes Kamala Harris because Kamala Harris is a black Asian woman and Tressie McMillan Cottom is a black woman, and they're both well educated and they have some similarities, I suppose, in their background. So she sees she identifies with her in that regard. She doesn't tell you why I should vote for her. Or if I was a black person, why I should vote for her. She says, you can hate the identity politics of it all. I certainly do. But she's a historic candidate. How? Because she's a woman of color. She wears a power suit. There's not one word about her policies. You say, well, Bernie's a historic candidate. Yeah, he was historic because he supported Medicare for all. We never had a president who came out and said, I'm going to push for Medicare for all. We never had a candidate who said that. That's historic. Bernie came out and said, we got to cut the Pentagon budget. That was historic. What's historic about Kamala Harris? Well, her look, yes, but not her policies, at least so far as we know. But that's who Tressie McMillan Cottom is. So, of course, she's going to go after Graham Platner on issues that are totally irrelevant to policy. And to me, that's useless. It's a waste. It's just a total. It's just using up paper and ink for no good purpose whatsoever. And what I guess frustrates me more than anything else is why others don't get this. Why people don't read this pablum and just say, this is nonsense. This doesn't help me. This doesn't tell me anything. She says that she defends the choice of Tim Walz. I guess there was critical criticism of him over Josh Shapiro. Well, she doesn't say, well, Josh Shapiro's a Zionist. Josh Shapiro would have pushed Harris to be even more supportive of Israel than she already was. So therefore, I'm glad she chose Tim Walz. Tim Walz is more of a populist. Tim Walz actually did, in his as governor of Minnesota, push through some relatively progressive policies. She doesn't say that. She says the only reason she gives why Harris was right to pick Tim Walz is because he wouldn't question that a black woman was in charge. Okay, I guess that's important. I think everyone who's a vice president is going to have their moments when they think, God, this guy's a jerk. This person doesn't know what they're doing. I'd be a better president than they would be. From all I understand, LBJ couldn't stand JFK. I mean, that's the test. Whether he's comfortable, I wouldn't question having a black woman in charge. Shouldn't the test be, are his policies good? Would he make a good president if something happened to Harris? That he'll give good counsel? Shouldn't that be the test? Call me crazy. But this is what so ultimately I can criticize Trustee McMillan Cottom. But you know what? She figured it out. She was like, yeah, if this is what I talk about, if this is what I write about, I'll get in the New York Times. If I talk about how American labor policy over the past 40 years, about how now neoliberalism and neoconservatism have devastated my community, how black faces in high spaces, like, is that how you say it? In high places, like Barack Obama and Kamala Harris, haven't led to a better quality of life for African Americans. If I wrote that, I wouldn't get this job. So she figured it out. And of course, the New York Times figured it out because their advertisers, that's exactly what they want. This kind of meaningless and yet ultimately divisive articles that elevate identity above everything else and pit people against each other based on their innate characteristics rather than on their class interests. That's what the New York Times wants. So I don't blame them because they're, at least the owner's got a lot of money and his advertisers, and he's got, a lot of people pushing him to promote this crap. Why do we buy it up? Why do we lap it up? Why don't we reject this at every turn? That's where I have a problem. All right, that's going to do it for me. Hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Tomorrow will be Halitics with Arlen, and looking forward to that. Thank you so much.